Welcome to another episode of Weekly Spark. For the month of March, I wanted to focus on some things that I do with gesso. It is a medium that you would normally prep a canvas with. You can prep a page with it if you want to make the page a little less absorbent or protect things from seeping through. And it's just a flat, opaque white. You can tint it with things, but when I use it, I tend to use it just as white. So for this first video, I wanted to kind of prep this spread. We all know that the white page sometimes is daunting. And if you have an idea and you know what you want to tackle, that's great. You can dive right in. But if you want to journal and you don't really have a theme and you want to play with the materials a little bit, then this, without any structure, sometimes is really hard to start. So I like to do what I call a gesso smear, and then I'll add some color to it and literally smear things around. I tend to do this with an old hotel key card, but you could, of course, use a palette knife if you have one. Great. So I'm literally going to smear a coat of gesso on the whole thing. I'm going to do one page at a time. On this side, I'm going to focus on tinting this and adding some color with some inks. I have pulled out a couple different colors of Dr. P.H. Martin Hydrus watercolor inks. I also have some acrylic inks, but I just wasn't feeling those colors today, because I don't know what this page spread is going to hold. I just pulled out kind of some blues and greens that are in my favorite colors. Oh, I did pull out some inks that are new to me. These are Liquitex acrylic inks. So that's muted green. I also have muted turquoise. This is Dr. P.H. Martin watercolor. It's olive. It is almost out. Just a couple drops. Let's see where that gets us. I think that you can get some really amazing textures just working the ink into the gesso. Now, of course, I can do intentional marks. If I wanted some kind of compositional move, oh, that's lovely. That's not like my favorite color or anything. You can scrape an area smoother. Let's try the other side. See, I like that as is. I like some of the really yummy light and dark places where the ink is thicker. I like kind of the thick, spackly texture of the gesso. So I'm not going to cover this page as consistently because of the material that we're going to be playing with. So these are Brusho crystals. They're from the UK. You can find them at some of your major art suppliers, but they're watercolor crystals. They come out as a powder. This is olive green, kind of keeping kind of a mirror image with this palette that I started. Put in a little bit of leaf green. Prussian blue. So there's less gesso down here. So I don't know if you can see that that went on drier, but it definitely did. Ultramarine. There's turquoise in here somewhere. And what I did when I got them, I just poked a hole in the top of each lid. You could always add more. You're going to see a little blooming here, and it's turning orange. When you use this stuff, it kind of breaks up into the colors that made the olive, and so you get these color variations that you wouldn't have thought about. The black is especially delicious because it's like olivey and orangey and blue at the same time. So you can kind of see where it hit the wet gesso. You can see the colors that I sprinkled down, with the exception of, I didn't get a lot of leaf up there. That's all right. So what I'm actually going to do is spritz this with water, because that's what activates the Brusho. And then I'm going to be able to go in with the palette knife and smear things around differently. I mean, you could leave it just like this. The finish that I've found from this, the Brusho crystals in the gesso, it's almost like Venetian plaster. It's like really gets smooth and kind of yummy. Very tactile. So I love the olive the most. Definitely need more water over here. There was a lot less gesso there. This would be a fun place to also and we're going to do texturing gesso and getting a lot more texture in probably next week's video. So you can kind of maybe get a clean piece of bubble wrap, Jenny, instead of one that's completely covered in paint. As a spread, I've got a little too much color over here, and I like the muted tones better over here. And that's something that I can, of course, address when I work on this in whatever fashion, whatever page this turns into being. I think I might... I really like those two muted colors. I'm going to leave it for now because I don't know what this is going to be. So this is the beginnings of some to be determined art journaling page. You can see that the ink going in very fluid. You can smear around as much or as little as you want. Again, next week we're going to do some stamping and more texture intentionally into that gesso. Here you retain some of the sprinkles, you know, where it hit the wet gesso. And so I let some of that be up here. And then other areas I smeared around a bit. I'm just going to leave that. Just breaking up that turquoise a little bit. So this has to dry, then it'll have this yummy texture because of the gesso and the heavy watercolor paper. It doesn't go through much. If you remember, that's where there wasn't gesso on the page, so we are getting a little bit of that intense brusho pigment bleeding through. But on the back of this page with the gesso and the ink, we shouldn't have anything. Right? All right. So for now, hopefully that sparks some ideas. This is a great, inexpensive tool to have that you can do a million different things with. I'm sure the 3 things that I'm going to show you over the course of this month are 3 out of 3,000. So hopefully that sparks some ideas. Stay tuned for next week, working with gesso again. As always, if you like this video, please feel free to subscribe, to hit the notification bell, and to give it a thumbs up, all those YouTube things, because that really does help the channel out. But for now, thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next week for another episode of Weekly Spark.